Our positional previews start with the infield spots for the Atlanta Braves, which is full of all-stars from 2023. Can they repeat those performances? What can they improve on? We'll discuss all that on today's episode of Locked On Braves, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can find me on social media at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you check out my written work over at BravesToday.com. Make sure you follow the podcast on social media at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast. Also, if you are new, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Even if you don't watch it on the YouTube version, go over there and hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 10K by opening day, and you can help me get there by hitting the thumbs up button on this video. Also, if you are listening on the podcast version, I first want to give you a heads up. We just moved over to a different podcasting platform. I know there's been some timing issues with the release of some of these episodes, so I apologize for that, but I have been told that is getting better. But thank you so much for your support, whether on YouTube or the audio version. I appreciate all my everydayers out there. And right now, looking with me live, we got Craig Burns, Braves VA, Brian Willits, our Guinness, the wild one, Philip Nichols, Nick Harvey, Leland in here as well, Rich, Jeffrey Humphreys, Doc's Cards, Alan Daniel, Truce, all in here with me live. Thank you so much for joining the live episode. Scott Carpenter in here as well says listens daily, but first time watching live. And Matt Mock in here. Thank you so much for joining me live. It is our positional preview episode, our first positional preview episode of the week. We're going to be doing infielders, followed by outfield, DH, and then pitchers on Thursday, with the mailbag coming up on Friday. Before we get into that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And we are starting our week of positional previews with the infield. And what an infield it is for the Braves. An all-star cast a year ago. We'll see if they can repeat that performance. But looking at the 2023 numbers by position, going by FanGraphs WAR at each position, the Braves ranked third in catcher WAR, F4 at 5.2, with the combination of Shawn Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud. At first base, the Braves also ranked third with 6.6 F4, obviously held by Matt Olson. At second base, they ranked sixth at 4.3 F4, again, mostly held down by Aussie Alz. And then at shortstop, 21st. That is the one, glaring weakness of this infield. Braves at 1.6 WAR, although Arcia was better than that, but did miss some time, filled in with Shoemake, Fawn Grissom, kind of brought it down a little bit. And then at third base, ranked second, 4.9 WAR from Austin Riley. So, again, you had three spots there that were top three in all of baseball. You had, all of them except for shortstop were top six in all of baseball. This truly is one of the best infields in the game right now. And I think they have the opportunity and the ability to be that for a long time to come. So let's start with the catcher position, and I'm going to give you obviously the starters, but on this episode and all the episodes to come this week, I really want to point out the depth at each position because I think that's important for Braves fans. We know who's going to be starting at these spots, but I think for Braves fans, for you as listeners, it's important to know, what does that depth look like? If things go wrong, if somebody gets injured, what does the depth look like at each position? So we'll start at the top, though. Obviously, Shawn Murphy, Travis d'Arnaud are going to be your two catchers. Behind them is Chadwick Trump. And look, in the brief appearances we've seen with Chadwick Trump, he is delivered, and he has been just fine. So that top three of Murphy, d'Arnaud, Chadwick Trump, I think that's a solid grouping of catchers. Obviously, if something happens to Shawn Murphy, you feel pretty confident with Travis d'Arnaud stepping in to be your primary catcher. something happens to Travis d'Arnaud, you feel pretty confident with Chadwick Trump stepping in to be your backup catcher. So your top 3 there, you feel pretty comfortable with. You go beyond that, as with most teams, when you go beyond your third catcher, it gets a little bit tricky. Drake Baldwin's somebody who might be ready at some point this year. Obviously, he's getting a look in spring training, made it up to AAA last year. I'm curious to see what he looks like behind the plate. Haven't been able to see that myself in spring training so far, but I think he has the opportunity. Sebastian Rivero is another veteran who is currently a non-roster invitee, and you got Tyler Tolby, who had a bit of a lost year last season, but has some pop and perhaps could be in there. I think if it gets past Chadwick Trump, they're most likely going to go out and try to find another veteran. And you can typically find that, I think it was a couple of years ago. I think it was the 2021 season. The Braves won it all, where they went through, the Kevin Smiths of the world and a bunch of Stephen Votes. They went through a bunch of catchers when Travis d'Arnaud was injured. And you can always go out and find those guys. But I think the top 3, Shawn Murphy, Travis d'Arnaud, and Chadwick Trump, I think you can live with that. And I think that is some solid depth at the catcher position. As far as Murphy at the top, I look for him. I hope for him to get a bigger workload this year. I never understood the split last year, unless there just were some injuries. And I know Shawn Murphy did have an injury there in kind of the middle of the season, which may have led to his rough second half. I never understood the split workload for Shawn Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud. You went and got d'Arnaud for the defense, and he's the better hitter. And it was a 50-50 split for the most part down the stretch last year. Unless there are pitchers, namely Max Fried, I think, that just love throwing to Travis d'Arnaud, I don't know why Shawn Murphy's not getting the majority of starts in 2024 and in the postseason. I think Shawn Murphy should be that guy, and I think if he is, and he stays healthy, I really believe Shawn Murphy is going to become the best catcher in baseball in 2024. I think that highly of him. I'm drafting him in just about all of my fantasy drafts that I'm doing. I am really high on Shawn Murphy this year. You look at last season, he was only second in F4 behind William Contreras, which Braves fans don't like hearing. But of catchers who had at least 400 plate appearances, he had the highest WRC plus at 136, even with a bad second half. So I'm really excited to see what Shawn Murphy can do. I see Brian Willett saying how many games, 140, not that many, but 120 games at catcher for Shawn Murphy. I don't think that's, a big ask, and may get some time in there at DH as well, depending on what's happening at, that spot. Obviously, Marcell Ozuna is going to be there just about every day, but it's just, I think the split with him and d'Arnaud, it needs to be more in favor of Shawn Murphy in 2024. You went and traded this guy to get him to be your stud catcher behind the plate. He played 108 games last year. And again, I know there was an injury in there, 370 at bats. He needs to be getting the bulk of the starts next season. Travis d'Arnaud's getting older. He had a bad second half as well. Again, unless there is just a pitcher out there that says they feel much more comfortable throwing to Max Fried, I think Shawn Murphy needs to be starting 2 of every 3 games. Certainly think that needs to be the case in 2024. Moving to the first base position, you got Matt Olson. And you really hope Matt Olson stays healthy and plays first base all year long. There is not great depth behind him. You have Austin Riley, who's never looked comfortable in my mind when he has played first base. They're working Marcell Ozuna over there at first base because they know that the depth at the position is just not great right now. It's hard for me to believe that Marcell Ozuna is capable of holding down the first base spot for any more than a game or two. Luke Williams, Jordan Luplow can play it and have played it in the past. You have Ryan Castile, who played first base on Tuesday. There's just not a lot of great options there at first base. This is probably the spot on the infield that worries me the most if something were to happen to Matt Olson. I just don't love the depth behind the position. But Olson is a workhorse, and certainly if he stays healthy, he's going to be out there every day. He was second in F4 among first basemen last year at 6.7, only behind another former Brave and Freddie Freeman. His 160 WRC plus was just 3 points behind Freddie Freeman and Yandy Diaz. So obviously one of the better offensive years for all first basemen, one of the better offensive years for all players. 54 home runs, 127 runs scored, and 139 RBIs. That wins the MVP back in the old days before you looked at WAR and you looked at, all these other analytics that tell us, quite frankly, who the better player is and who gives you the best value. But back in the day, 54 home runs, 127 runs, and 139 RBI, that almost guarantees you an MVP. It was a pretty incredible season for Matt Olson. The question now is, can he repeat that? Can he hit 50-plus home runs again? Does he need to? I think he can. I think getting to 40 and 40-plus is certainly something that we should be looking for, but it's just really hard to reproduce the numbers that he put up last year. I think one of the bigger things for me, and I'll talk about this just about at every infield position, can he get better on defense? When the Braves traded for him, he had a Gold Glove in his bag, and there was the thought that not only were the Braves getting somebody who maybe had some untapped potential at the plate, which we've seen come to fruition, but there was also the potential for a Gold Glove caliber first baseman. He has not been that nearly at all in his first 2 years in Atlanta. So that's something I hope to see improve for Matt Olson in 2024 as well. Again, it's hard to imagine him offensively being any better than he was last year. You almost got to just expect him to take some steps back offensively, but I would love to see him get a little bit better defensively at the position. So that's 2. That's catcher and first base. We obviously have 3 more to go as we round out the infield preview for the Atlanta Braves. We'll get to the rest of those here next. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And if you're into the minivan life like me, they got you covered for that as well. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always want to find exactly what you're looking for, and you'll find it with eBay Motors. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Mentioned a little bit earlier, but it is our positional preview week on the podcast. We're obviously going over infielders today. Tomorrow, we'll talk about outfield and DH spots. And then on Thursday, we'll go over the pitching staff, both starters and relievers. And then we'll have our mailbag episode on Friday. So that's what's on tap for the rest of the week. Let's jump back into the infield preview, though. And let's jump over to second base, where you got Aussie Alz at the top. He finished 5th last year in F4 at 4. That was brought down by a negative defensive rating. And that, in my mind, is the biggest thing I need to see improved upon for Aussie Alz especially, but really the entire infield, or at least the right side of the infield, and Aussie and Matt Olson going into 2024. Aussie wasn't just bad in 2023. He was honestly somewhat awful. He ranked 25th out of 27 second basemen in fielding run value last year, which is a new metric over on Baseball Savant. Kind of puts everything together, range, arm together into one number. That's minimum 500 innings, by the way, but 25th out of 27th is pretty bad. It's the lack of range that really kills him. I don't know if it's the new shift restrictions, if that exposed him a little bit, because I thought in the past Aussie had a chance to win a Gold Glove, but he was really bad last year. And again, You would have expected it with the arm, maybe holding him back coming off the shoulder injury, but it's the range more than anything. It just, again, I think it's the lack of the shift going away really hurt Aussie Albies last year. And that's something he has to improve on going into 2024. At this point, I think we know who Aussie Albies is at the plate. He's going to have his highs, he's going to have his lows, but at the end of the year, it's going to be a 260, 270 average, 310, 320 on base percentage, and 25 to 30 home runs. He hit 30 home runs this past year, the second time in his career he's done that, and something he's now done in the past 2 full seasons that he's played. So he's been closer to 30 than 25 the last 2 full seasons. I think another question for Ozzy is, can he stay healthy? He's missed time in 3 of the last 4 seasons, didn't miss much time last year, but he has had some problems staying healthy. I guess the only good thing about that is you feel pretty safe with the depth that you have at second base this year with Luis Guillorme, with David Fletcher, with Luke Williams, with Luke Waddell, but particularly Guillorme and Fletcher. You feel pretty confident in those guys backing up Ozzy. The only downside there is you're losing your number 2 hitter. We'll talk about Orlando Arcia in a minute, but when you're talking about the offensive drop-off from Arcia to a Fletcher or Guillorme, it's not all that terrible. But you're talking about the offensive drop-off from Albies to Guillorme or Fletcher. You're taking out a number 2 hitter. You're asking probably Michael Harris to go up to that number 2 spot, where there's going to be more pressure on him. So that does concern me a little bit, but hopefully if something does happen to Albies, hopefully nothing happens, but if something does happen, I feel pretty good about either Guillorme or Fletcher holding down that spot for, a month and a half if they need to, while Aussie Albies is out. But that is a huge loss in the lineup, and that's a huge step back offensively for the Braves if that were to happen. Moving over to the shortstop position where you have Orlando Arcia. In the end last year, Orlando Arcia is who we thought he was. Slightly above average defender, slightly below average hitter. You go back to the quote-unquote competition that we had in spring training last year, and I said at the end of that podcast when he was named the shortstop, I said he'll be fine. He will not hurt you. And that's exactly what happened. Now, we were teased a little bit by the first half from Orlando Arcia and thought maybe the Braves had unlocked just, this great hitter, this all-star hitter like he was in the first half. And that wasn't the case. But at the end of the year, he was who we thought he was. He's a slightly above average defender, a slightly below average offensive player. His positive fielding run value of 3 ranked 12th out of 30 shortstops who had a minimum of 500 innings at the position. So again, a little bit better than average. His 98 WRC plus ranked 10th out of 20 shortstops with at least 400 plate appearances. So right at middle of the pack. So that's who he is. And that's who he was last year. There were big splits, as I mentioned. /294, 345, 424 before the All-Star break, and then just 235, 297, 416 after the All-Star break. But again, the overall numbers speak to who we thought Orlando Arcia was. If he repeated that again in 2024, I don't think anybody would be upset, especially for $2 million. That is still a great value. So Orlando Arcia is fine. And I think the depth here is solid. I think I like the depth here even better than I do at second base, although I don't know how much I trust the arms of either Fletcher or Guillorme at shortstop. But you do have both of those guys. Waddell, as I mentioned, I throw Ignacio Alvarez on here. I don't think that is going to happen, but got to throw my guy Nacho in here whenever I can. I think Fletcher handles the position better defensively of that group. I don't think the drop off from Arcia to any of these players would tank the season. Like I talked about with Albies, the offensive drop off from an Albies to a Guillorme and a Fletcher, that would be significant. You're taking out an all-star bat at the top of your order for some contact hitters that don't have much power that you're going to have at the bottom of your order. If you have to replace Orlando Arcia with one of these guys, you're still getting a pretty solid defender in either Fletcher or Guillorme. Although, like I said, I don't know, they don't have the arms of RC on the left side of the infield, but I think they'll be able to pick it just fine. And you're going to stash them at the bottom of the order where RC is going to be hitting anyway. So I feel much more confident in the drop off from shortstop depth than I do at second base. Now, that is not the case as we move to third base, where Austin Riley is obviously an all-star. He is the number 3 hitter in this Braves lineup. And while 2023 wasn't a down year for Austin Riley, it feels like it's an overlooked year. 37 home runs, 117 runs, 97 runs batted in, and a 281 average. I mean, that's the season that Austin Riley just had, and I feel like nobody talks about it. It was his lowest WRC plus output since, or in the last 3 seasons, at 127. In the past 3 years, he's had 4.8, 5.6, and 5.2 FWAR. He's a solidified stud in the middle of the order, and it feels like there's even more in the tank. It still, in my mind, feels like we have not seen the best that Austin Riley can provide. I mean, I think there's an MVP caliber year coming for Austin Riley. And it's just crazy to think of the 3 years that he's had pretty much being a 5+ FWAR type of player. I mean, Austin Riley gets overlooked, I think, last year because of what Acuna and what Matt Olson did, but it was a really good year. But could this be the year he reaches 40 home runs? I think it's possible for Riley, certainly. But the big thing for Austin Riley, he's getting better defensively each and every year. Defensive metrics aren't very kind to Riley. The eyes would tell you he's much better than the metrics say. And I'm always going to trust my eyes over any defensive metric. I use them, to be somewhat helpful. But when I'm watching a player every day, I'm going to trust what I'm seeing more than what a metric is telling me. He was 16th among third basemen last year with a fielding run value of 0. But on FanGraphs, it was the first time he had a positive defensive rating. Riley's already mentioned this year he thinks he can win a Gold Glove, and that's what he's shooting for. 2 things holding him back from making that happen. The lack of lateral movement. He's got to be better side to side. He's got to have more range side to side. And it is a below average arm. I think the arm gets it done, but it is a below average arm for the position. But in my opinion, again, from what my eye test tells me, he's great coming in on the ball. He's great on the short hop. And he gets anything in his bubble. And Austin Riley does that. And he's going to make the plays that he should make. And he's going to make some plays that maybe you don't expect him to make either. And he's getting better each and every year. I don't know if a Gold Glove is going to ever happen for Austin Riley, but he is making improvements in that area while also being a solid number 3 hitter in your lineup. And again, the depth is solid here with Fletcher and Guillorme. Having those 2 guys, even if they're not both on the roster, not both on the bench, because I think there's a case to be made to carry both of them. I think there's also a very strong case not to carry both of them. But either way, you got both of those guys in the system that are going to give you solid depth at second, short, or third, should you need it. Now, again, like I said, with Aussie at second base, the drop-off offensively, if one of these guys has to fill in for a significant amount of time, it's huge. I mean, anytime you're taking out a number 3 hitter and you're replacing them with a Fletcher or a Guillorme, that's going to be a huge loss. But I think those guys could hold it down for, like I said, month and a half if Riley is out. So, again, that's the Braves infield preview. Really solid all-stars all across the board. And I really like the depth this year with Fletcher and Guillorme and what they can do if they needed to fill in. We're talking about veteran infielders who can play solid defense. They're not going to kill you in the field. Good bat-to-ball skills. You can hide them at the bottom of the lineup and it'll be fine. And I think they even have the ability to get on base to set up the top of the order. So I really like this infield. I like, obviously, the starters, but the depth, I think, as well, that you have with Fletcher and Guillorme, bringing in those 2, I think that just improves the infield even more. All right, next we'll get to some news of the day, including Tuesday's game where Chris Sale absolutely dominated in his spring debut for the Braves. We'll discuss that here next. Get the buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. And they also have MLB futures bets in there right now. You can bet on the World Series winner. The Braves are catching the Dodgers. Actually, they're at plus 450. The Dodgers at plus 320 as the World Series favorites right now. They also have over-under totals, win totals out there right now. The Braves sitting at plus 270 for the best regular season record as well, behind the Dodgers. And you look at the awards categories out there for NL MVP, Ronald Acuna Jr. at plus 500 is the favorite there. And the favorite for the National League Cy Young is Spencer Strider at plus 500. So you want to get in on some MLB futures bets. They have those out there at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Let's talk about what's happening in camp for the Braves on Tuesday. Had a rough game against the Pittsburgh Pirates, but it wasn't rough until the starters were out. And I always say whatever happens after the 4th, 5th inning, especially early in spring training, doesn't count. But Chris Sale got the start. And from what I can tell on the radio guys, Ben and Joe, that I was listening to, they were blown away by the stuff that they saw from Chris Sale. Fastball was up to 97, had some 94s, 95s in there as well. But it was 2 perfect innings from Chris Sale, and you couldn't ask for a better spring debut for him. Obviously, it doesn't mean much, but certainly you would rather have that than him getting blown up in his first outing in a Braves uniform. So love that from Chris Sale. Hopefully we see more of that as he gets ramped up. Forrest Wall is off to a good start in spring training as well, trying to get that last bench spot. Had a stolen base already, a couple of hits in there. He's looked really good. Article out talking about how he was working with the Braves hitting coaches in the offseason, and with the Braves looking to fill that last bench spot with somebody that has some speed. I think he is certainly in that mix. The only reason I haven't had him on there is because I don't know if the Braves want to carry 2 left-handed outfielders. I got to imagine they're going to prioritize putting a right-handed outfielder on the bench, and either Luplow, who I think is the favorite, or Eli White. But certainly, Wall's showing some things. And I think there's the decision to be made with JP Martinez, who batted leadoff for the Braves on Tuesday. And I take some stock into that when you see players batting at the top of the order like that. It means maybe the Braves want to get some more looks at him, and he got on base twice, scored a couple of runs. But if you think JP Martinez and Forrest Wall have some legitimate potential, do you sit them on the bench at the big league level where they're likely never going to play? Or do you send them down to Gwinnett to get everyday at bats in case you need them to step in? I think that's a serious question with both of those guys. But Wall, like I said, off to a good start right now. Shawn Murphy traveled to go catch Chris Sale. I think that's very important for those two to kind of learn each other. And obviously they worked together great on Tuesday. And Shawn Murphy also had a couple of hits, including a couple of hard hit balls as well. Like I talked about earlier, I think Shawn Murphy's in for a huge, huge season. David Fletcher had a couple of bloop hits, and that's just who he is. He is a contact hitter. He's going to put the ball in play. and every now and then he's going to find some grass out there. But wanted to make sure, talked about a couple of those players looking for some bench spots. Owen Murphy is the one who followed Chris Sale, and from what I could tell on the broadcast, he had a call that didn't go his way against O'Neal Cruz that might have got him out of that inning. Instead, things kind of unraveled. Gave up a grand slam to Key Brian Hayes, or I don't know if he gave it up to him or the person the pitcher that came in for him, but either way, gave up 4 runs in that inning. But that's everything from Tuesday for the Atlanta Braves. Continuing our countdown to opening day. We are 30 days away from opening day this season. 55 players have worn the number 30 for the Braves franchise. Kyle Wright wore it from 2019 to 2023. Peter Moreland wore it in 2018. Current third base coach Matt Tuiasosopo wore it in 2016. Ben Sheets wore it in 2012. Wilson Betterman, name I hadn't heard in a while, wore it in 2001. Brad Klontz, another old familiar name, wore it in 1997. Mike Stanton wore it from 1989 to 1995. And Orlando Cepeda wore it from 1969 to 1972. So we are 30 days away from opening day. Thank you so much for joining me. We're up over 100 people in here live on the chat. We got Sean Finley, Little E, who says he is sold on Sale. 1 start, spring training. That's all it took. Nick Harvey, Jeffrey Humphreys, still in here with me till the end. Matthew of Wolf and Man, Braves N01 in here as well. Brian Willis, Philip Nichols. Thank you all for making it to the end of the show here. Thank you so much for all your support of the Locked On Braves. Make sure you follow us on social media at shortstopball, at _Braves. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. On the road to 10K, my opening day. You can help me get there by hitting that thumbs up button. Also, make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.